A question. Am I under Cayle Littlechief 9/11 Truth Hawaii?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Welcome, welcome, everybody. Welcome to Fire in the Sky. We're just going to wait for a few more folks to join, and we're going to be getting started here in just a minute. If you're not already, be sure to sign up for the TAP email newsletter to find out about all of our upcoming events and announcements over at truthactionproject.org. Okay, looks like we just have a couple folks left. What do you guys think? When should we get started here, or?
I say take it away.
William Douglas. Okay, ready to go? Okay, all right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for a very special TAP forum, Truth Action Project Forum, Fire in the Sky. So earlier this month, we passed the 6-month anniversary of what is officially known as the Lahaina wildfire disaster. On August 8th, a massive, sudden fire, ripped through the town of Lahaina on the island of Maui in Hawaii. And, as longtime 9/11 truthers, we've learned to take a skeptical perspective when these types of events happen. And there have been many anomalies that have been uncovered along the way. And we felt that it was appropriate to revisit what actually happened that day. And we've brought a handful of guests to unpack all that. There's been a concerted effort to really sell the official narrative. Just earlier at the Super Bowl, which is the most viewed television programming event in the country on an annual basis, they played a PSYOP documentary about how the local football team, and brought the town together, and as a way of solidifying the official story, the official narrative. And this is how the visual environment and the propaganda machine cements in these false flag style events. So we're going to turn our attention over to our guests, Paul Delorier and Bruce Douglas from the Maui Investigation Team. They are local citizen investigators that started from the onset to investigate, working with the community to build up a repository of data and information. They're local residents, and they've been really taking a lead on this. We're gonna, pivot over to them. We've also got Cayle Littlechief, who's a longtime 9/11 Truth advocate. But let's go over to you, Paul. Paul Delorier, Maui Investigation Team. Take it away for us. Tell us what you saw from your investigation.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you for that introduction. And it is really quite a situation that we occurred here as our community. It's such a shock, and many of us, right off the bat, said, this is not a normal fire. There's something off here. So many of us started to investigate, and a group of 30 of us got together right at the onset, and we started gathering data and information, and we became a repository for our community of videos, testimonies, photographs, and other data that's been collected. And so with that, we've looked at 30 different anomalies that we've been gathering a lot of data and information on. And I'd like to share some of those with you here so that you can really start to see how, as you mentioned, Bruce, we're dealing with belief systems, I think, on many levels. And this is a way for us to fight that propaganda that keeps on getting reinforced by going through the facts, the truth. So I want to start off here with a slideshow. And if I can share screen here, there we go. And so what happened, I want to go through a whole series of things that occurred. first, we're going to start with the pre-fire conditions. The way it was right before the fire, and then the wind generation that occurred on August 7th. Then we'll go into the many different fires that occurred on August 8th. And then we'll start with the main fire that occurred at 2:55. And from there, we'll go to the infrastructure failure and the fire escape, which is unbelievable when you start to look at what actually happened. And the scope of destruction, which again is unfathomable in terms of when you start to really look at what really truly occurred. And then many anomalies. And then we're in a process of looking at having a public investigation and hearing. So I will go into that also. And your viewers' support along that line would be very helpful. Now, here, right here, in this whole area is Lahaina. And you can see all these different colored bands are different organizations that own swaths of land around there. Now, they were supposed to be taking care of all of this light brush that occurred as we start to look at these pre-fire conditions. And it was very light grass that is invasive, and it really does catch fire fairly quickly. There were some significant fires that occurred right in that area over the years. So again, that's why these people were supposed to cut the grass, and they didn't, and it hasn't been reinforced by the county. So that's one of the conditions. Another very strange thing that occurred were these wind cyclones. We have wind cyclones that occur around Maui, but not to this intensity that happened here. So let me just clip this little thing here if I can. And you can see that there were several of these going along the coastline right prior to the fire itself. And then I want to go into a little bit more about what happened in terms of the actual weather anomalies. And Bruce, you want to come on in here and do the share screen? I will stop share. And
yes. You showed this one already, but another thing that happened before the fire and the day before and the day of the fire was a strange white haze that no one's ever seen before. On the left side of the picture is a normal day, and on the right side is the white haze condition that we had. And here's another, from another part of the island, again, this strange white haze that covered the island. And when you look at the satellite images, you see off the coast of Baja California, this strange cloud formation, this white haze forming off the coast of Baja California. And this is a moment, day by day action. And you see that hitting the Hawaiian Islands the same moment we got the white haze and it going on its way. What was that big blob of stuff coming at us? I have yet to get a good explanation as far as to what that is. But I study wind anomalies. I study hurricanes and weather engineering to try to reverse engineer to figure out how weather was engineered. So I was saving the shots during this time. But one strange thing happened. This is August 5th. The fire was on August 8th. And you see normal patterns of wind, on the 6th, the day before. But the day before, on the 7th, this strange lineup of clouds started coming in. And everybody took notice. By the afternoon of the 7th, there were distinct lines going straight across the sky coming at us, wave after wave. And many of us looked at that and said, boy, that's weird. Look at these lines of clouds. You notice the lines of clouds stop at the Hawaiian Islands and don't go past us. And then here's the 8th when the actual fires happen. Again, you can see the lines of clouds. There's a little anomaly blip that blots out Hawaii for this moment for some unknown reason. And then on the 9th, the day after the fire, it goes back to the normal wind conditions again. So let's again, the 7th in the afternoon, you see these, distinctive lines of clouds. In the afternoon of the 8th, the same thing happening. Now, I'm going to look at what might have caused this. We're going to look at some more satellite images. But first, I want to talk about cymatics, because I'm going to be talking about how frequencies can create patterns. So cymatics is a way of taking a loudspeaker, putting a plate above it and throwing some, frequency into it. And here the person's playing notes, and you see how it lines up in different sort of patterns depending on the note that's being played. This is the interesting thing with cymatics. You can do the same thing on a loudspeaker where you put water in a petri dish and lay it on a loudspeaker, and you play frequencies into the water. Depending on what note you play, what frequencies you play, you get these same type of patterns that you sometimes see in the sky. So this is the infrared satellite image that sees heat or reflectivity in infrared. And so we're going to play this loop. This is Hurricane Dora. It's a colorized loop, so it's exaggerated on the upper end of the spectrum. And you can see Hurricane Dora. It's small, contained. There's no real clouds above it, but this strange anomaly appears just as it's passing above it. You can almost see like cymatics frequencies being played in this upper region up here, where it's happening. So you see that area up in this zone right here, and here's Hurricane Dora passing us. And after the hurricane passes us and the storm is over, then that strange pattern suddenly just disappears right after the fires start. So let's look at that close up here, where you see, again, you see the pattern right above us right here happening in the clouds where it starts lining up, like you can see, and you can almost see in this area right here, like a frequency generator creating that cymatics pattern as it's going on its merry way past us. So let's do a close-up of that one. Hawaiian Islands, you see the same pattern up here of these clouds lining up and doing a frequency like generation like this. You can almost see the pattern, right in here as it's coming past us. And this isn't something I've never seen before. In 15 years of studying weather satellite images and studying hurricanes and storms, I've never seen this type of pattern. It gets really obvious right here. In lower resolution, you might not see it as well. We're going to do some CGI on this and try to make it stronger so you really see it better. But you can really see this pattern. Again, it only goes right up to the Hawaiian Islands and then stops. So whatever this frequency generator out here was doing, it had just enough energy to hit Hawaii and stop afterwards. And then by the time the next day on the 9th, goes back to normal weather patterns again. So let's do one more time, super close up. And you can really see this glistening, the frequency vibration patterns. And this is, for me, this is a smoking gun, because if the windstorm was engineered, then you start wondering, well, what else was engineered in this potential? And in my way of looking at it, this is a very smoking gun of a engineered weather pattern. So, the question is, what could have caused this? What type of technology do we have that could have caused it? Well, many of you might be aware of the HARP antennas in Alaska, the High Energy Active Auroral Research Program. This is an old school system from the 70s, and it is a basically high frequency active auroral research program capable of running 3.6 megawatts into the upper atmosphere, into the ionosphere. It's an ionospheric heater is what it actually is. And physics today talks about it being the most powerful ionospheric heater on Earth at the time this was done. How much energy it can point toward the ionosphere. What happens when you heat the ionosphere? It raises up and gets higher. And then you suddenly turn off the frequency, boom, it comes down, creates extra low frequencies down below. And you can literally guide weather patterns, create low pressure cells, move the jet stream and interact with aerosol clouds using this type of technology. And it's not just, HARP. There are HARP-like ionospheric heaters all across the world. Again, HARP is old school. Now they have new ones in dishes and arrays and mobile arrays and all sorts of different ways. And they interact different arrays on each other, and you multiply the effect by having multiple different arrays pointing at the same spot, the same frequency. So as it says here, this is from the patent. itself, with the advent of smaller mobile arrays, artificial ionospheric heaters will no longer be limited to the polar regions like Alaska. The new technique allows HARP-like heaters along the equator to create ELF, extra low frequencies, in tiny artificial ionospheric mirrors. So in the patent itself is talking about now with the new school, they can have small mobile arrays and interact with the ionosphere and create extra low frequency waves in the sky. Could that be what we're seeing in this whole situation? Here's another thing called the HARP dome that sometimes lives in the Honolulu Harbor at Pearl Harbor. It's a massive dome. It is a ionospheric heater instrument inside of that with massive arrays of power generation and capacitors to hold the power to affect, megawatts of power into the ionosphere. And so could this have been a part of what was being used along with other smaller arrays? Hard to prove, but the evidence is pretty striking in what we're seeing. So was the Lahaina fire windstorm engineered or natural? You get to decide.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. And if you can go back to, I'll do share screen again. And let me get back. Okay, and on that day of August 8th, there were a lot of fires that occurred. This is up in Kula. This is 40 miles from Lahaina. And right when this fire started here, this fire was at its peak. There was also another fire also in this area that was started. And then in Kihei, we had all of this area that was burning. So there were a lot of fires. We had 6 different fires, another one in Kahalui here. So it definitely took a lot of the resources that we had and scattered them so they couldn't concentrate on the Lahaina fire itself. And as we go, you can see the start of the fire. Now, there was an early morning fire that happened in Lahaina that was at in the morning at 6:30, and then that fire then was put out by 10 o'clock. But only later during the day, that's when the destructive fire really happened. And here's the onset of that fire that occurred at 2:55 p.m. And you can see that it swept around this whole area. And again, that brush ignites really quickly, but it doesn't have a lot of fuel behind it. And you can see that's where the cars were going here. And this was all light brush here as this started. I want to point this right here, this point out, and I'll go back to this when we start looking at vehicles also that were incinerated. But as we progress here, let's look at some of the infrastructure failure as this fire started. First, there were no cell services prior to the fire. They went out that early morning, so there was no cell phones. And that happened before the early morning fire also. There were no cell phone services. There were no electricity also, starting at around 3 a.m. on the 8th. So again, the fire, the big one started at 2:55 p.m. So there was no electricity. There was lack of water also, especially in the residential areas. And the thing that really affected many of us and really blew our mind is that we have this incredible alarm system, and none of the alarms went off. We have many of these 80 that are on Maui surround Lahaina, and none of the alarms went off. And then when it came to the escape, again, this is something that is just unbelievable for a lot of people when they start looking at the facts. But cop cars were blocking the exit roads and forcing people to go back into the flames itself. And a lot of people were, like this person here, this is what they were facing when they went into the actual fire. So if you can imagine the intensity of this. So this is a car that's trying to get, and they finally made it to Front Street. We've interviewed the person who took this video, and it is just an inferno that is really difficult to grasp, especially when you talk to a lot of people who really have to deal with trauma now from this. And you can see how quickly it spread. Now, this is again, there was one person that lived in this complex named Spider, and he had a garden hose that he had water till 11 o'clock in this one area. And he stopped these buildings from catching fire, but you can just see the inferno that was all around him. And again, as we go further down, you can see there were many explosions also that occurred that were difficult to really have any reasoning behind, because again, the transformers on the electrical lines were not live. And as you further down, I mean, again, a lot of these explosions along Front Street, and then this thing just took off, especially with the winds that Bruce described. And those winds were very circular in many ways. And very strange about the wind also, that if you went on the Kihei side, at this time, there was hardly no wind. But then all of a sudden you go over to Lahaina and you have these raging, swirling winds that were really feeding the fire. And it's
these are gusty winds. These weren't like sustained force winds of a hurricane. A hurricane that was 600 miles away had nothing to do with these winds. But they were very gusty, going this way and that way, and coming from a direction that rarely happens. It's coming from the mountain down to the ocean.
So these are people who are on Front Street who were able to just get across enough, but you can see the intensity is just amazing. That what they had to go through and why we lost so many people during this incident. And let's look at the wake of the destruction. So we have damage to over 2,200 buildings. 86% of those were residential areas, which is very interesting because when you look at the box stores, we'll show, again, these areas were not burnt. It consumed 2,170 acres. And Lahaina was really had great cultural significance for Hawaii, for the Hawaiians. It was the capital of the Hawaiian kingdom at one point in time. So again, there was a lot of historical artifacts that were there. And it was a small business epicenter for Maui, the major generation of income and a tremendous amount of small businesses, independent small businesses that were located right in that area. So, and as you look at the damage that occurred, this is the scope of the fire, and all the red was totally destroyed. But again, you look at some of these areas, very interesting. These were all box stores that were untouched. And then you look over here, it goes right up to here, and right here just happens to be the police station and the fire station right here. So that was the overall scope of the spread. And some of the anomalies now that I'm going to go into, again, let's just go look at this. You can see a lot of these green areas were buildings that were untouched. Again, for this inferno that occurred, again, this comes down as another one of the anomalies, like the weather we were just looking at. And you can see that, again, very strange how we have shrubs and bushes that are fine, but then we have right next to it buildings that were totally destroyed. Here you see a whole stream of buildings here that are in perfectly fine shape, but everything else around is reduced to white ash. So another one of these strange anomalies too that I want to go over, not only how the fire evaded certain buildings, but again, the trees that were left. Again, this is not normal in terms of a fire that occurs of this magnitude. This is fuel for this fire. And for some reason, you can see the number of trees here that remain while everything else is reduced to white ash. And we start to look at these trees. There's some very strange things that occur. Now, we're in one parking lot here. There were 8 trees that were all burnt right at the very base, way down. And some of the trees that we looked at had leaves on it still, but yet, if you look at the base, totally burnt out. These branches were put here after this was taken 3 weeks after the fire, when we were able to get into the burn zone. And you can see it just totally burnt out to ash way down deep. And so there's some interesting things that go along with that type of phenomenon. And Bruce, you want to talk a little bit about lightning strikes and plasma waves?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, this is pictures of trees burnt from the inside at the base. So when lightning strikes a tree, the lightning is plasma energy, and it strikes and the energy grounds out at the earth, intensifies right where it grounds out, and it starts the base of the tree on the inside on fire. And if any sort of plasma wave technologies were used in starting the fire, this would be something we would see, something that would look like plasma wave technology. And so we went around and looked, and we found 27 trees that were burnt at the base from the inside, indicative of lightning strike or plasma wave technology.
Yeah, you can see, and again, we then took samples also, because we wanted to see if there's any trace elements left from any of this type of thing. So right here at the base, this is all ash. The ash goes down fairly deeply. The root system is totally charred. So we took samples then of the ash of 18 trees. So we will do analysis of that at a later time to see if there's any trace elements. We also took samples of within the wood itself. We found that the penetration usually only goes for large branches about 12 inches. So again, we're just gathering data, information, so that we can do a later analysis. Now, another thing, another anomaly that I'd like to focus on here are the automobiles and how they were really disintegrated in very strange ways, burnt. If you can see, like there's almost like this energy that just came right along the side, the back side of this vehicle, and totally destroyed the front part of this vehicle, but yet the back and all of this is perfectly okay.
Now, remember, if plasma wave technology was used, just like lightning strikes, it goes towards something that has mass to it. So a car is a lot of metal. Grounded, it's a lot of mass, and so it would attract the energy of the plasma waves to it, just like lightning strike would do. And so keep that in mind.
And this is a picture here. Look at this. This is amazing. When you look at, this was taken 3 weeks after the fire, and you can see light shrub here, perfectly fine. Quonset hut, perfectly fine. This house, untouched. Even you can see the shingles here. Everything was fine, except the front part of this cab. And look at the back part of the cab. Again, this was on a large parking space. And again, it very strange. And when I showed you that one spot before, this is where that vehicle is located, right here in this parking lot. This is the Quonset hut. This is the house that I just showed you. So again, it's very strange when you have light brush and all of a sudden you have a vehicle that's destroyed like that. And there were many vehicles like that throughout Lahaina that again had this strange thing where the dense part of the engine is, look at the destruction, but yet the back part of the cab is fine. And there were, and again, you can see that this is tempered glass, so the melting point's about 1600 degrees. But again, how can this happen in a driveway where this house is perfectly fine and these shrubs are in good shape? This is, again, 3 weeks after the fire. And you can see aluminum here that it's about 1200 degrees that it melts. But again, everything else here in perfect shape.
When you see aluminum melting, it's within the normal range of a fire, so that's nothing special. But when you see steel melting, that's outside of the temperature range of a normal fire, and that becomes a serious anomaly.
And you can see how steel was bent here, and it did sag and melt to a certain extent. And you can see
steel softening and melting and sagging is normal, but steel turning into molten steel is not normal.
Right. And so, and you can see some of the again, the steel structures. Now, another anomaly that we'll look at too are the number of vessels that were burning offshore, some over 200 yards away. There were over 50 vessels that were outside, and they just got toasted. They got lit. And we have one of our testimonies is someone who was right by the harbor, and they heard explosions one after the other go off. So again, this is very strange because there was nothing else that would create that type of explosion, with the transformers now. So you can see how far away, and again, it just adds additional questions to this, that these vessels offshore could be destroyed like this. Now, another anomaly also is the white ash. It takes a tremendous amount of heat to turn all of incinerate to this level. Now, you saw from that video with people going through the fire that the intensity was incredible. And you can see here by the destruction how it just turned into this just pile of white ash. And again, trees standing still around. And again, there's plaster that you can find in some of these areas, depending upon where the heat was. But here's an example too of before and after. And you can see this, and the reason why I put this up there is because of this blue building. And there's been a lot of speculation about anomalies of having blue objects still remain. And here's that same house here, totally destroyed. And if you go though, but there are still a lot of blue objects that were intact, like these umbrellas and these different, white things. There was plenty of porcelain, pottery that were still remained in decent shape. But there was plastic also that still remained, which again raises questions in terms of any type of, let's say, outside of the normal thing used in the fire itself. So this gives you an overview of the types of anomalies that we're looking at. We did different Zooms with 5 different fire captains and fire chiefs and showed them the anomalies and additional things also, like bodies, which we're not going to show at this point in time. But they all said the same thing, that this is more than just a natural fire. And let's just look at some of the causes then for this that are being put
Just
forward.
to state on the bodies, we found pictures of bodies like the day after the fire that were not like barbecued from the outside, but looked more like they were microwaved from the inside. They were very strange bodies, not only of humans, but also animals that were found and pictured that is not a natural burn look like you would see.
I mean, we even have one where a person still has his hair, but everything else is reduced to this black heap of ash. So again, we're working with experts to really make sure that we have the right data and information that we put up. But right now, we're not coming to conclusions of cause. What we're doing right now is just going over some of the speculation that's there and just look at some of that at this point in time. And we'll be doing a lot more investigation as we get more and more data together. We're still getting videos from people and information. So let's go into this. Let's look at one of these here, global warming, to start off with. Now, here are August temperatures, different times. So you can see 2023, the mean temperature was 80.1. And then you go to 1953, it was 76.9. And again, it's even warmer in 1946. We're at 81.8 on that day. So again, these are different datas that show that, wait a minute, this is normal fluctuation of weather. And when you look at the 10-year averages then of the weather and the temperatures, you see that again, it's normal fluctuations. There hasn't been any real shift in terms of the weather itself, except for mainstream media, who's putting out a lot of information about global warming or disinformation that then creates an illusion. And again, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with propaganda. We're dealing with a lot of belief systems that get created out of that. And here's a simple way to look at it. Okay, global warming, let's look at the facts. Okay, and here you have the 10-year averages. Bruce, you want to add anything to that?
Well, the hurricane itself being, 600 miles away and being a very small, tight hurricane, did not generate winds. We've had hurricanes go past us before, not have any effect whatsoever because the diameter of the effect of a hurricane is so small.
So again, this is really interesting. And when we look at Hurricane Dora, that was another thing that they said is another cause of this event that occurred. But it was over 500 miles away. And you can see how far in terms of this spiral that is around this whole mass, that's the extent of the high winds that would be generated. Usually hurricanes, small ones, it's about 50-mile radius from the epicenter. And for large ones, it's about 125 miles. And now we're talking being over 500 miles away while the fire was starting at this point in time on August 8th. So again, by just looking at the facts, we're able to debunk a lot of the stuff that keeps on being put out on mainstream media as causes that takes us away from really looking truly at what happened in terms of the anomalies and stuff. And again, we had another thing was high winds, but yes, what generated the high winds? And I think Bruce just, laid it out pretty clearly in terms of what we're dealing with. Bruce, you want to add a little bit more to this?
Well, again, the interesting suck that the clouds they stopped right at the Hawaiian Islands, whatever was generating those clouds. And we had on one side of the island, we had like sustained force winds from these, wave after wave of cloud. But on the Lahaina side, it was these strange whirly winds that would go this way and that way and spinning like in circles, not a sustained force wind like a natural wind would be. It would go this way and turn. But generally the winds are going from the mountain down to the ocean, which last time that happened was about 1920. For about 30 minutes, they had a windstorm like that. It's never had a recorded history of winds going from the mountain down. It always goes around the mountain in this pattern.
So again, when you start to look at it, it raises a lot of questions. And also, Bruce, do you want to just talk a little bit about also the arson points and anything about? Certainly, there's been a lot of speculation about high energy weapons, and certainly when you look at the trees, for example, that is part of it. So if you want to go into
we
ignition
looked
points.
for ignition points because there was the brush fires that started from different areas, and then suddenly these explosions started happening within the thing. So if someone was generating a fire, if you think like that, you'd do the windstorm, you'd start the fires, arson points, and then once everything's engaged in smoke and looks like it's a fire, then you would hit your key points with some sort of plasma waves in order to ignite it, because we have those technologies now. So what I have here is I've discovered 2 ignition points at the south side of the fire. There's a probable one here and another one right here. I couldn't exactly pinpoint it, but I was able to actually pinpoint on the south side of the island, alongside of the highway, 2 little places in the brush to the side of the island, on either side of the highway, where the ignition points were. And you can see this is the direction of the wind going up your screen here. And so this is the leading edge of the fire right here in the brush alongside of the fire. And there was one on either side of the highway, which ignited the brush in this area. And it's very obvious when you look at it, that this was like 3 weeks after the fire. You could still see the black smoke where the brush was ignited. If you look upwind, you don't see any fire up there, but you look downwind and boom, the fire carries its way, down the hill and toward Lahaina, further down your screen there. And it totally, matches the pattern of it. And that fire then, the brush fire, was what engulfed the town in smoke. And then you have all these anomalies of houses and cars, just boats suddenly just exploding. And you see on the other side of the highway was the other ignition point, of that fire, where the leading edge and the brush alongside that highway, further than you could flick a cigarette. You'd have to get out of your car and ignite that on fire. There's another ignition point for the Lahaina Luna fire, the central portion, which was just below this substation. Again, it could have been electrical jump from the winds, or it could have been arson. We don't know. But the other point that was the north end of the island and caused that to burn was along this road up here where there were no power lines or anything to do it. There was no specific ignition point I could find, but it was along this road right here where it started. Okay, Paul?
Great. So let me continue on here in terms of what we're in the process of doing right now at this stage. We are looking at having an independent citizens investigation. And the reason why it's so important at this point in time is that when you look at the official government investigation that's occurring, this may be a name familiar to 9/11 truthers, that Underwriter Laboratories has been hired by our Attorney General to oversee the overall official government investigation into the fire. And in a month from now, they're going to now expose, again, for those who don't know about Underwriter Laboratories, they were integral in terms of the NIST report, which basically gave this bogus pancake theory that never happened before nor never happened after to these 3 skyscrapers that went down. And again, a lot had to do with the information that Underwriter Laboratories provided to the NIST report so that they could come up with this bogus theory. And this is the same organization that also joined the World Economic Forum in 2020. They are the ones that are doing the official investigation. So a community investigation, we need to be empowered in this and really move forward and say, no, we're not going to listen to your bogus theories. We're going to go and we're going to work with experts and look at the data, the information, what's truly there. Like I said, we have over 1,000 videos. We have a lot of information that's still coming in from a lot of the residents. And from that, then we're doing detailed analysis. Now, we are looking at having then 4 different avenues to look at having a public investigation into this. So if you could go to your viewers, if you could go to MauiCommunityInvestigation.com, you can start to get an overview of all the different categories that we have in terms of the data and information, much more than what we just shared here right now today. And as you look at that, you'll see a petition. And if you could sign the petition, we'd greatly appreciate it, because we need to show support for these different avenues of community type investigation that we're looking at doing, using common law, using going into the county law, and also state law, and also in the Senate chambers also. So these are things that we're pursuing. But again, if people could sign the petition, we'd greatly appreciate it. Also, help to spread the word. And we certainly could use financial support too, because boy, lawyers are expensive, and we're certainly finding that out. And so we could use some financial support also in this process moving forward. But again, I think we have a real smoking gun here, which is very different than what happened in 9/11, when all of a sudden you were dealing with so-called terrorists and an inability to really do a thorough investigation. We have just gone in there and done the investigation ourselves. So again, you can use even the QR code that I have here and go to our website. And if you could sign the petition, that'll take you right to the petition, this QR code, and you can put your phone right up to that also. Okay. And that is conclusion of our presentation that we have. And I'd love to have a conversation with all of you about how this also relates to 9/11 itself. So let me stop share.
And just a note, I mean, we're seeing this same pattern of fires all across the world. It's just not Maui, but we see these fires like the one in Quebec. There were like 32 fires, forest fires started simultaneously in an area where there wasn't a drought or any other reason for fires to start, and, time and time again, we're seeing, these over intense fires started in multiple areas and things exploding that shouldn't have. And we're seeing this pattern. It's just trying to come to the truth of exactly what it is and how to prove it is a trick.
And like Chile is a very good example. It's very analogous in terms of its coastal location and how it was kind of marked for smart city, just like Maui is also marked for smart city. Again, if you look at many of the other fires, Canary Islands, Greece, it goes on, they're also marked for that type of infrastructure development of smart cities. So again, I think that we need to really help get information like this out so that it becomes a wake-up call for others. Certainly in 9/11, we tried to get that message out. I was started getting involved in 2002. I started a grassroots group in Massachusetts. And then I got involved in organizing New England grassroots groups. And then 911truth.org asked me to be a facilitator for their grassroots. And so I helped develop that and get more grassroots going. And we had 268 grassroots groups throughout the US and Europe that I was facilitating on a weekly basis. We had a lot of interesting things happening, including a lot of saboteurs and the patterns of the sabotage that they would also do that was being basically CIA contractors. So it's been very interesting, my involvement in 9/11 and living here in Maui. And then all of a sudden having this kind of deja vu happen again in many ways. But I just want to say that there's one thing that's extremely different this time around when we have this faced with this catastrophe. In 9/11, that very day when they were showing people jumping from the towers and the towers collapsing, and it was like on a continuous loop, playing over and over and over again, that shock really had an impact in terms of the belief systems that got formed. And on that very day, also, they started the mantra of Osama bin Laden. And again, that was able then to penetrate deeply into a lot of people's subconscious, so that when we were faced with trying to expose the truth, even looking at the 11 characteristics of controlled demolition and putting out the facts like that, people would just shut off automatically because their belief system was so intense and built so strongly by that repetition for that whole period of time. And it was really, for me, it was after when I got loose change, that's when I really woke up and said, oh my God, this is definitely an inside job. But, but not too many people were able to cross the Rubicon and start to realize that the real perpetrator, the real terrorists, are those that are in power. So it's been, an interesting process of how those belief systems of trusting our governance has been eroded, especially the pandemic. That's been huge in terms of how that's been able to break down that belief system that's been so embedded in our subconscious since birth. I mean, it's inculcated in us. And that's part of the process. And that's part of, how media works to really influence that. My hope is, though, that this is a different situation where we have a lot more conscious awareness at this point in time as to the tyranny that we're facing. And my hope is that, again, this can start to get out. The information can get out. So if you can share that with your friends, with other people about what's truly happening at our website and sign the petition, we'd greatly appreciate it. Because again, I think that in order for us to really make a dent and a shift, we need to change these belief systems, and having facts and data just put out there clearly, objectively, no spin. Here it is. This is the way it is. Just take a look at it yourself. They can come to their own conclusions as to what we're facing right now. And hopefully this can also help the 9/11 truth movement too. Because again, as Bruce was saying, there are many global incidents happening. Chile is just very, very analogous to what we just faced here in Lahaina, with many of the same anomalies. So again, Cayle, I know that you have some things. Bruce, do you want to add any additional thing here?
Well, we all want to know what was the cause of what started the fire, and that's part of what Maui Community Investigation is all about. Again, we're not drawing conclusions, but we're looking at all possibilities on what caused it and how these are similar to other fires, other places, especially when you look at, things igniting when there shouldn't have been any reason to ignite, boats out in the middle of the water suddenly exploding into flames. These are very indicative of some other sort of technology being used.
Can I jump in here? Bruce, this is
Yes.
your show. Can I just want to claim my executive privilege to make a remark. May I?
Please.
Okay. So my brother's next to me. I have to do something. I have to shut his thing off. So I am in awe of what you've presented. And TAP is 190% about bringing the revelation you've shared. And I mean, my latest passion has been telling the truth about the COVID. Yes, we need to tell the truth about the 9/11, and the truth about JFK and the 60s assassinations and the warning from Eisenhower. Eisenhower warned us 3 generations ago about the military-industrial complex. Evidently, from my quick takeaway, Lahaina was subject to a military operation. Why? To build a smart city? Or was it to show the Chinese how powerful Americans are about, whatever? Tom's on the call. He has pictures of a used car lot in Waikona or wherever it's called in Milwaukee that has melted vehicles, precisely in the fire signature you've shared. So I'm going to just say, let's go to Cayle, and we understand how deeply we are in a resistance against this tyranny, but the power structure is so evidently powerful that we need to be in awe of this, and then be thinking, how do we organize and how do we take action, and the practical steps of appealing to our legislatures and our as a political truth movement. That's what we're talking about tonight, as far as I'm concerned. Chuck out. Trina has her.
Great. Wow. Thank you guys for that presentation. I mean, if we were looking at 2 or 3 anomalies, we might be able to come up with a more reasonable explanation. But when we start adding one on top of the other on top of the other, and you really take a close look at all these photographs, I mean, it looks like we're looking at Hawaii's 9/11. I mean, it really feels like we're looking at 9/11 all over again. You start adding up these anomalies. You start, looking at, the planning and the infrastructure that went into this. I mean, we know that 9/11 was a false flag, so that becomes the skeleton key for so many of these other types of events. And of course, it sounds like a rather shocking allegation to suggest that HARP and these deep state technologies are being used for these false flags. But then how do you square those anomalies with basic questions of core competencies, such as the alarm system, the police setting up barricades, the water being cut off. I mean, every step of the way, it appears to be something coordinated. And so all of these events become data points to help us understand what is really happening in our world. And so we're definitely going to pivot more into an open discussion after we hear from Cayle. Trina, did you have something really quick?
I was just going to ask, yes, it would be quick. But if Cayle wants to go first, that's fine too. I was just going to ask if it would be okay if I played a 48-second video from a government agency on direct energy weapons.
Yes, absolutely, Trina. That needs to be shared, and then let's go straight to Cayle.
Is that okay
Sorry,
with you,
sorry,
Bruce? Is that okay
course.
with you?
It's good. It's good.
Because I know a lot of people that I know are pointing fingers to direct energy weapons. So I'll just play this real quick and then everybody can remark on it.
The Department of Defense spends about $1 billion annually developing directed energy weapons, such as high-energy lasers and high-powered microwaves. These weapons can disrupt or destroy their targets at the speed of light. For example, DoD has developed high-energy lasers that have successfully shot down drones, but speed isn't their only advantage. They're also less expensive per use than traditional weapons like guns and missiles. Despite those potential advantages, DoD has had trouble getting these technologies out of the lab and into service. The Army has developed a detailed transition plan to support moving these weapons into the next stages of development. We recommended that the Navy and the Air Force develop similar plans.
And that was released, let's see, that was just released 11 months ago.
So we have to understand that lasers, microwaves, and plasma waves are three very different animals. I don't believe lasers were used. That's photons. That doesn't have enough energy to actually do it, and it'd be way too easy to see because it's light waves. The plasma energy, is, and they have direct and laser guided microwaves, and we saw some of that potential with bodies, but the plasma waves is more likely, and plasma energy is a change of state technology. It's not just that it's heat, it actually changes the state from solid to liquid and liquid to gas, which would explain why suddenly things burst into flames because you're changing the state of it. That's how it's able to take out its target. It changes the state of the solid to liquid and liquid to gas, and how it was applied is a big question, but secret space program and other thing have technologies that we don't even know about on the outside or barely hear about. So we're still looking for what that might have been.
Let me just add to that also that there is just a tremendous amount of stuff that is right now being marketed by Lockheed Martin and other contractors. And yet this is not even the top secret stuff. This is stuff that's just being used out there. So again, we don't know, especially when you look at the CIA and Black Ops, and truly what is developed and how they're utilizing it. There's a lot of different technologies that are out there right now. So
can I just jump in, Bruce, very briefly, and just make an observation that within the 9/11 community, Judy Wood has been effectively demonized. However, this idea of the plasma tech, which is the combination of two kinds of complicated energy systems to affect a result. So I think we all need to be agnostic on the science and not go down any as specific, but just acknowledge that what's happened is being covered up it's not wildfire. It's not natural. And we should kind of peel off the kind of the wonky, what tech did it, and focus on the covering up of what really happened. And that I think what's clear, though, is this was a military operation against Lahaina to test out tech And I think they're testing out tech. John has his hand up. Let's hear, but we have to go to Cayle because, and I do want to hear from John. John has composed a history of Hawaii, and Hawaii is like, this is like the most abusive thing you could do of a master against the subject, is to subject it to a test of such gross expression of tech over life and nature and humankind and so on. So Bruce, I'm pitching it back to you. Cayle, and then maybe John should be recognized.
I did want to answer a question that popped up on the comment chats, just to answer it, because a lot of people don't know about the children, and that's a big thing that with the social media. There were over 2,000 children who didn't show up for the first day of school, and it was assumed they were missing. And that was an assumption. And it wasn't very long after that that the Department of Education was able to find most of those children. Some of the families moved off islands. Illegal aliens had to leave and didn't want to show up. And we never saw any indication on the streets and with the people involved that there are people that are missing that did not appear on the missing persons roll. Like, we have not seen any indication of that. So I want to dispel the mythology of the missing children.
Thank you for addressing that, because there's a lot of clickbait content out there. There's a lot of content out there that, you know, that states some of this as fact, that says DEWs destroyed Lahaina, and you know, that's not what we're trying to do in this show. We're speculating, we're looking at the evidence, and I can tell that we're all hungry to get into the roundtable discussion that definitely is on the agenda. I have some questions for you guys, of course. I mean, we're opening up a whole can of worms here. If we could hold off on that, John, I see your hand. If we could hold off on that and hear from Cayle and his on-the-ground experiences, and then pivot over into this, you know, rapid-fire roundtable discussion. I could tell we're all hungry for it, but if we could hold those questions and jot, you know, take your notes now, because if we could, Cayle, you've got the floor for, you know, 20 minutes or so. You know, let's tell us about your on-the-ground experience, and then, you know, tie that into your experiences, you know, as a longtime 9/11 truther.
I just want to say thank you for allowing Paul and Bruce on. Like I said before, they have so much information. They've been working on this for weeks now, months now, that it goes way beyond where I'm at. I'm more in line with 9/11, but what's happened out here on the islands is running parallel, especially the investigation and being blocked, is we see what's going to happen, and we have a big fight on our hands. So this is the 9/11 of our islands. But I just want to say, you know, whoever, I think it was Mr. Fall, was saying how well this presentation is. It is excellent. I've seen them speak before, and I just knew they were the right fit for this. So I thank you, Bruce and Trina, for coming to me after the war room and hearing my call for some action and getting this into the light, and then allowing me to bring in Paul, and Paul brought in Bruce, and this is just awesome. Way beyond my expectations. Just to say, for the Hawaiian people, for the Hawaiian kingdom in general, the Kanaka Maoli, they have a rule of law, and it's called Kapu Aloha. And that is so powerful to be able to take on the system in a non-violent manner, and more constructive through peaceful protests or peaceful just enlightening or educating the people through knowledge and in a non-violent manner. You know, the kiai, I wear this with pride because we've stood with the Kanaka Maoli through the Mauna and through Standing Rock as well. When we were occupying the banks that were funding the pipeline in Standing Rock, the Kanaka Maoli stood with us. So when the Mauna hit and we had a call to action from Maui, we knew we had a duty to stand up. And in that journey, we learned so much more than what you think of Native American. I'm Cayle Littlechief, Kiowa Comanche. enrolled with the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma. We have our own struggles with the U.S. government, and then we have our working together as well. It's not just about fighting; it's also coming together in solution for the future. But the truths that I learned on the Hawaiian Kingdom and the annexation and it being illegal, really woke me up to a whole new world living out here on the islands and being Native American and then being American at the same time. During the Mauna, we came together, Americans and the Kanaka Maoli and the Hawaiian Kingdom were bridging together under truth. And it does play a huge role in this whole event that happened out here in Hawaii, not just Lahaina. That is their capital, and it was attacked. Ken O'Keefe, he really took the reins back in the day and really, no one can touch his caliber of like being not politically correct about this whole process. But he did show the world what was going on with the fight between America and Britain's not mentioned, but that should be a mention in all of this as well, because Kamehameha was armed and funded by Britain to unite the islands. But I'm not going to get into that. But bringing it all around, what I've tried to do with 9/11 Truth is it's like the core to any kind of how false flag works. We're at 20 years plus trying to get the word out on 9/11. We have a plethora of information on how false flags work and hoax as well. I don't want to mention the medical procedure, but that really woke up a whole another group of people, and that's why Richard Gage branched off and started doing his own thing with Unleashed. And the reason why I have so much respect for Richard Gage and Cayle is that they stick to the physical facts of 9/11 versus going into any conspiracy theory like aliens came and took over New York, or Bigfoot came in and crushed the building. You know what I'm saying? Is like he sticks to the physical facts, and that's what Bruce and Paul are doing right here, and that's what's needed. So we can go into and there's directed energy weapons. Even with 9/11, there are vehicles that are questionable at the base of the towers that were burned out, and nobody knows why. And outside of New York at the time on 9/11, there was a major hurricane right outside the shores of Manhattan. So, we might want to look into that. But, it took a lot of different types of technology and different types of people on the ground to set up 9/11. Whether it was setting up explosives to, directed energy weapons, there was a marriage of different types of technology used to do 9/11. And that's what happened here in Lahaina. There is a collective of events that created Lahaina's fire, besides just power lines falling and creating some brush fire. I do want to mention Eric West. He is a real estate agent, which is funny. But, beyond a land grab, he did put out some interesting work on the anomalies of the burned out vehicles. And there's one vehicle that stuck out to me, and I put it in the chat. It's completely burned to a crisp. The glass, everything, and it's right outside of Lahaina, and it's just surrounded by dirt. Like, how did that car catch on fire like that? That's just one anomaly. And Paul is very familiar with Eric, and I believe you guys will be doing another video.
I'd like to do a little shout out for Eric, because he has been so important in the initial stages of the investigation and fire. That first 2 weeks after the fire, he was there and getting drone footage and important footage that I think is crucial as we look at facts and data, especially early on before anything was disturbed. So Eric's been great, and I've done a video with him. We're going to be doing more with him. So yeah, he's our brother in all of this. He's part of our team that, as we look forward, moving forward with this.
Right. And just to touch on the military side of this, from a little digging, the Army just it was not even a month after the fire, they already had a summit lined up for AI technologies to take over the island, and how they're going to integrate it and implement it into our system, not only militarily, but the private sector as well. They are looking to, Hitachi has a big project with us along with Chile, and I forget the name of the island, but it's outside of Africa. They've already converted that island with their tech, the smart grid city tech, the smart grid Maui is what they call it, smart jump Maui, I believe. And I just bring this up because this is prior to the fire, and Maui was the lead ship for Hitachi, and the bringing in the smart grid type of AI to help, I don't know, streamline the infrastructure on how we live and, work, and also militarily as well. So I provided a couple screenshots and I have some links as well. But just something to think about, because, this is where we're headed, where it's no secret that, we have some global powers that are needing this technology to basically corral the human population into some electronic grid. So, that coincide with as some conspiracy theory, but it is happening, and you can't deny it. So Maui, like Bruce Douglas's work on Monsanto, we are a huge experiment because we're so isolated from any other large landmass throughout the world. So they can get away with their experimentation on us, and those are chemicals, and how they're shaping our world through chemicals and eugenics and all that. But also tech wise, the islands are a great way to use us as guinea pigs once again and implement this tech. So I just want to say thank you guys for bringing this all together. I appreciate it, and it's went above and beyond, so yeah, thank you. Mahalo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cayle. Yeah, I mean, I happened to be in the war room right after Lahaina happened, and you were in there, giving your on the ground, testimony from the perspective of a truther, and that really struck me. And so, of course, when they played that documentary, and I think actually I'll even play a clip from it as we start to pivot over into our roundtable, just so in case, again, I don't really watch spectator sports, but I just so happened to find out that there was this this documentary. They had made a whole extended documentary, and they played clips from it. They brought in the players. They knew what they were doing. This is part of the psyop. This is how they sell the psyop. They create this fictionalized entertainment that repeats the official narratives in the storylines. And if they're pulling that, it means that they feel confident that they got away with it. And that's why we need to do this show, to really get all this information out there so that people understand. We've got when you go through anomaly after anomaly, it's very clear that we were not told. This is not what we were told that it was, and it just feels like we just keep lurching from one 9/11 to the next. So
right.
we still have more time on the clock. I mean, I wanted to make sure that you really got an opportunity to share your side of things before we pivot over into the direct roundtable. I don't know if you had any last minute thoughts or anything you want to share about your own personal experiences. Like, were you ever in danger? As far as the day of your experiences. Go ahead. Yeah.
You know what? Let me
Cayle,
just add. Hold on one
I
second.
really want to honor and
Hold on one
respect
second.
Nelson.
Add one thing.
Yeah,
So my
please
wife,
add in this, if we could, there's hands up.
who's speaking? So my wife and I, the day before, we noticed that, and Paul brought this to light. The sky was this crazy thick haze. And I grew up in Los Angeles, Southern California. I know what smog is, and went through all that. Some days was red, don't go outside, just like terrorist threat. Red, don't go outside. It was the same thing the day before. We noticed, we're like, what is going on with our sky? And then boom, the next day that happened in Lahaina. I just wanted to add that.
And I'm glad you did, because that's something that eventually that's on my questionnaire is, was the air seeded with accelerants, some type of flammable particulate matter? That is my working theory based on everything that I'm seeing, and that hasn't really come up yet directly in this discussion, but that's the working thesis that my eyes are telling me. So I want to kind of pick that apart and tease in it. So if you feel that you've basically got your piece out, you're definitely going to be part of the round table, but I guess I know we're starting to get some hands and we want to pivot over into that. Go ahead. They
call it VOG. And VOG is smoke supposedly from the volcano on the Big Island, but the winds were coming in from the north. The winds are coming in from the north, not the south. So a lot of the times, right before some storms too, we see this happening quite frequently, actually. My wife is saying, I never grew up with skies like this before, and they call it VOG. You want to look into VOG. I fell for that when I first moved out here, but a lot of the winds come in through the north, not the south. And even if it was VOG from the volcano, we don't have a major eruption happening like that.
Yeah. So I'll just make a few statements on this thing with the haze. Yes, there is a possibility of accelerants, and that certainly is part of the investigation that we're doing. Unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of samples of that film that was left on things. But many people who are old-time fishermen, everything like that, said this is not VOG. This has nothing to do like that. The way it's coming, the sealing of the actual haze itself, something like they've never seen before. And these are fishermen who's been fishing the waters for over 60 years. Seeing this.
I'm going to propose another idea of what that was. Accelerant is one concept, but the windstorm of going around, if you're going to use harp antennas and harp-like things are ionospheric heaters, they act on ions. So you have to have ionic particles. So if you were to throw some ions into the air, then energy waves can interact with the ions and start moving them around and start swirling them. You can't make sustained force winds with that. That's a natural hurricane, but you can take winds and start making them circulate around like this and going this way and that way and moving them in a pattern. So I'm wondering if it was some sort of ionic particle that some sort of energy device can interact with to cause localized winds in the area.
And I add to the firefighters were cut off of their water. They cut them off. Not only was traffic diverted and people were forced to go back into the fire, but the firefighters' water was cut off, and there are some interviews, just like 9/11, I heard explosives and then they try and hide, scrub them off the internet. They're there, the firefighters like, we lost our water, or neighbors or witnesses are like, the water was cut off.
Well,
so slowly went down and lost pressure. No, it was cut off.
So we can talk about water distribution. We had conversations with a lot of the firemen who were part of that response, so we can get into that. But certainly there was plenty of water in the box store areas. And then when the residential area didn't have as much, and there's reasons why some of the firemen are saying. But again, it's part of the investigation. It's a bit speculation at this point in time. But again, it certainly does need to be looked at a lot more thoroughly.
100%. Okay.
Super. Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that we kind of got those ideas out there, and I guess we could start pivoting over into taking some hands. The only thing is, I'm going to want to do some timekeeping on these responses. I don't know if we want to keep it into 1 minute or 2 minutes in order to be able to effectively.
Bruce, okay, Bruce, I'll be the timekeeper. Let's go to John. John, take 2 minutes. Oh, let's go for 3 minutes with John. Yeah. John's written a book on the history of Hawaii and their domination by the plutocracy. Come on, let's give John, go for it, and then we'll go to Susan, and I'll keep the I'll keep the clock going. But John,
all right, yes, thank you, thank you very much. Yeah, I moved to Hawaii in 1965 and stayed there for 36 years. So I lived through the Cayle Littlechief era. I used to go to those meetings. I was very impressed by and later influenced by Keanu Sai. And he's the main author, the main source of my book, Liberate Hawaii, which I did in 2014, because the issue of sovereignty is front and center here in this whole discussion. I'm very much in support of the sovereignty movement, regaining sovereignty. It's all an illusion that it was transferred to the United States. Those of you in Hawaii are well aware of that, so I won't dwell on that. I'm definitely in touch with Richard Gage and also honor his work and the fact that he's not sticking only to the issue of 9/11, but following truth wherever it goes. I think with respect to the Twin Towers, you notice how it was different with the Twin Towers coming down and Building 7. The towers had this enormous cloud of dust that then covered the entire lower Manhattan. When Building 7 came down, you did not have that cloud of dust. So I'm inclined to believe that there was both the nanothermite explosives that triggered it, but also possibly testing out this directed energy weapon, which turned the concrete to powder. I'll just leave that on the table for discussion. I was, like I said, with Kaho'olawe. I'm surprised, though, that there hasn't been a similar reaction to the occupation of Pohakaloa. There seems to not be any interest. I mean, of course, there was huge turnout to protect the mountain from that gigantic telescope, which I love watching that. But why let them get away with poisoning Pohakaloa all these years? And the issue of conspiracy theory, whenever somebody uses that phrase in a derogatory manner, it means they're trying to sabotage and short-circuit rational discussion of evidence. And we need to call out people whenever that's used in that capacity by our opponents. So what I think is going to be needed is that Hawaii needs to accelerate the sovereignty question, because if you're separate from the United States, then you're ready to bypass all those WEF plans and chart your own course. And I think this can happen, as it did with Lithuania with regard to the Soviet Union, at the time that the empire disintegrates. And I think we're on the periphery of that at this time. So I'll close with one further thing. It shouldn't only be the Hawaiians themselves that are pushing that, but link it up to the locally born and raised non-Hawaiian population, which constitutes about 80% of the population, maybe not 80%, but all the local born Japanese, Chinese, Filipinos, Samoans, that's who need to be brought into the discussion on sovereignty. So I'll close with that. Thank you.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. Thank you, John. Bruce, should we go to Susan? She has her hand up.
Well, let me respond to something that John came up with about the technology of 9/11. About 10 days, 2 weeks after 9/11 happened, there appeared on the internet a expose put out by the military of one of the Scandinavian countries. I forgot which one now. And it said, here's 20 reasons why the Twin Towers were brought down with a fourth generation nuclear warhead. And there's 20 reasons why it was there. I then went back the next day to look at it some more, and of course that was scrubbed from the internet, gone. But their expose was, it was a directed energy weapons. I mean, not, was a fourth generation nuclear warhead, which is small, highly directional. You can point it and it's clean. Its byproducts is tritium. And I'd love to test some of the ash from the 9/11 time for levels of tritium. But the Herald signature is, the neutrinos coming out from a nuclear explosion is able to melt steel and turn it into rivers of molten steel like we saw. But if it doesn't have any mass, it can't interact with it. So what rains down all over New York City was papers, because papers didn't have mass, but all the typewriters and desks and elevator shafts and steel was turned into rivers of molten steel, which is exactly what a fourth generation nuclear warhead could do. And you look at the whole pattern where first there's a huge explosion in the sub-basement. You see a mushroom cloud-like thing rising above the Twin Towers. The 27 steel towers up the centers were gone. When the pancakes started coming down, you see the squibs happening. So there's thermite involved to cut the cross members so it could come down naturally. But thermite doesn't have the ability to turn things into rivers of molten steel. The technology just isn't there, even though thermite was used extensively. It wouldn't have the heat. It's a quick burn like that. It's able to slice something. And that was something else this expose from the military of one of the Scandinavian countries talked about, to dispel the thermite theory, even though that was used. But then when the pancakes come down, those 27 steel towers up the center were gone, vaporized. And that was the only technology, because at that point, directed energy weapons, plasma wave energy was not developed unless there was some sort of off-planetary assistance on that one. But the only technology we had was a fourth generation nuke that's small, highly directional, clean burning. You can practically bring it in on a backpack. And all those various things, particularly with the Herald signature of what rains down over the city as papers, because it doesn't have any mass in order to explode it. So I just wanted to throw that in the mix.
So I think you know why we're not speculating too much as to what weaponry was used, because here we are 22 years later and people coming up with all these different things still that you are, I'm sure, discussing at different points in time as to theories and things like that. So that's why we're just gathering as much data as we can while the site is still intact somewhat. They are cleaning up several, they have about 300 lots cleaned. But again, we're going to keep on gathering data so that we can shed light as to what really happened. But again, I'm sure the discussion will go on years after in terms of costs.
Yeah, and that's why this now, because we know what happened with 9/11. So we're jumping on it as quick as we can before they try and pull what they did with 9/11 with the evidence. So I commend you guys.
Should we go to Susan?
I think so. Thank you for your patience, Susan. We kind of jumped into our Q&A a little bit early. Let's hear from you.
Okay. Well, I'm in Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm the facilitator for Boston 9/11 Truth, and I know Paul said he was from Boston, involved in.
No, we're in Western Massachusetts in the Berkshires. We started 9/11 Truth. We had a 9/11 Truth group there. And I certainly, remember our marches that we did with, I had my revolutionary hat and throwing cardboard things of, the 9/11 Commission report and stuff into the water. But I am amazed that Boston 9/11 Truth is still going strong. And hats off to you for keeping that going and keeping the discussion going in the way you have.
Yeah. It's been a struggle. We've had our
this
deep dives.
This is who I was speaking of, Susan in Boston, to get you on her show. They do
that was my next
every Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's who I was talking about.
Bruce mentioned, fourth generation nukes, and we actually have a speaker Thursday talking about that. So maybe you'd like to hop on our call Thursday at 6:30 Eastern time. But that's not why I raised my hand. I worked in Boston at a law firm for 16 years. And in 2008, it was a 7-story building on the harbor, right on the harbor. In 2008, we had a major fire, and the Coast Guard sprayed water from boats from the harbor. So does Hawaii have a Coast Guard? This shut off of water when you have water all around you, couldn't they have any means of accessing that water?
Well, there are a lot of questions about why we didn't have enough water to put out the fire. First of all, when you talk to the firemen, the level of intensity of the fire, once it took off and they didn't have water in the hoses there immediately, things were going so fast that, again, it just took off big time. And then in terms of getting any boats there or anything to do that, we're looking at helicopters, but they were saying the winds were too intense for the helicopters to go out and start using buckets. They then later utilized buckets. But again, to get in close to shore with these boats, with the big hoses and stuff like that, it wasn't really that accessible, especially when you look at the area that was consumed by the fire, over 2,000 acres. That was just not accessible through the water or water hoses from the ocean itself. That's why they were using buckets from helicopters, but they could only start doing that the following day when the wind subsided somewhat.
Wow. And I'm also very concerned about the land grab. And the meager $700 that each family gets. Is anybody pursuing?
Well, it's a lot more than $700 that families are receiving, and there are the county is getting involved, and that's where our hope is, because they are taking responsibility for the residents here in a real way, as opposed to the state or federal governments like Red Cross or FEMA or Army Corps of Engineers, who are all involved. We have our county to really help us, and they've been doing, I would say, overall, as best as they could. Many of them were like deer in the headlights. It's like, oh my God, it was just the scope and magnitude of what happened so quickly was way beyond what anyone could even imagine.
Yeah.
The beautiful part of the whole story is how much aloha the community came together to help. I mean, hubs were instantly set up, supply lines were happening, donations came in. They blockaded the road going into Lahaina. Oh my God, why would they do that? So we actually loaded boats to go around the blockade and get food and water and supplies to people. Molokai stepped through the other island across the water from them, and they sent supplies from Molokai in boat after boat to bypass the blockades.
And it was all residents.
Yeah. All residents. So the aloha that came on afterwards, and the hubs, and what went on with each, like 9 different hubs came together to supply people with food and supplies and, things like that were, so beautiful that you talk to the Red Cross people who've been to all the disasters all over the place. They say, we've never seen this before. Everyone just waits for the government to do it. But here, the government was next to useless at first. They're in fact hindering us.
Yeah, especially for the first, especially the first 3 weeks when the greatest trauma was happening to people. And as Bruce was saying, the spirit of aloha was just absolutely mind-blowing. You go to the hubs, we spent time there going to the hubs and talking to a lot of the people. And the level of the way that not only the Maui residents, but other islands also, and other people flew in to help out, just volunteer as community. This was really in contrast to the federal government's response, which was atrocious.
Can I add, here on Maui, my family and I worked with Pray for Maui, and we physically went down to Waimanalo and Hawaii Kai and Waianae, which is up north on our island, collect donations, brought them to the harbor, and we had private charters sending them to Lahaina at the time. And still to this day, there's horse stables down in Cocoa Head that were working with us and bypassing FEMA and Red Cross and the government once again, just like hurricane in Louisiana with hurricane
Katrina.
Thank you. Dropped the ball, and once we all came together, and that like Bruce was saying, the aloha was just overwhelming. But it's sad that it takes the people to have to do that when we have every military branch in and the Space Force here on our islands, occupying the islands. Where were they? You know? And let me just add, with the alert system for the hurricane alert system, they claim that they didn't want to set off the alert system because it would send people to the hills. That is not true. And I shared in the chat that alert system is also used for wildfires.
I have one final question, if I may. The barricade, is that still up?
Oh, they have, yes, they right now they're only allowing people into the burn zone that are residents there. So we've been going in with residents who take Bruce and I in, and that's where we do our investigation. It's not as strict as it was because right now they have a lot of contractors going in to clean the sites. So they're, so they have quite a bit of activity, but that opened up really over the past month. But prior to that, it was pretty difficult to get in. I snuck in a few times.
What was the official reason for it?
I again, I don't know if they could use the term crime scene, but or whatever, or there was some reasoning that there could be ash of actual bodies that are still there that people would be walking on and desecrating. So there was reasoning like that, but they were really trying to prevent people from going in there, even the residents. But then that slowly opened up, and when that did, then the residents brought Bruce and I in because they know what we're doing, and it's really, this is a community effort. This is all of us working together collaboratively to gather this data and information.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great, Chuck. Did you have a hand up there?
I do have a remark, and it is about where do you go with this information? And that on one level, you've Bruce or Paul have both, I think maybe Paul spoke to the appeals the people of Lahaina would make. Now, really what we want is the truth about what happened, but they're not going to tell us the truth about what happened. So Paul says, there needs to be a citizen event, a citizen tribunal, and that's powerful. And I think these are the kinds of things the truth movement needs to be engaging in. Now, I will speak to the unspeakable sea event that hit us, that if you say it on YouTube, you get kicked off. So we've been subject to a series of events, and we know we're going to be subject to more events. So I think what TAP's interested in is creating a community that's not just educational about this, but that is actually pragmatically directed toward making a difference with the truth. And that would mean that we do go to our elected officials. We do go to our county district attorney and make the grand jury appeals. And apparently different states have different rules for this. We've talked about this at TAP and we had David Meiswinkle on from National American Renaissance Movement, and they are making appeals on the C thing that we remain unstated. So what I'm interested in What TAP's interested in is building these networks of conscious, intentional political groups that directly appeal for our redress of grievance. And the grievance is we were lied to about what really happened. That wasn't a natural fire. Those weren't natural events. There is evidence. How do you generate 26? I thought it was 2,600 degrees to melt glass, for example, not 1,600. That these are sustained energy events. The pictures, you guys have essentially compiled pictorially an indictment for to show that what's reported as wildfire natural is false. It's not true. Just flat out. Not it's so connecting to 9/11, connecting to Eisenhower's warning about the military industrial complex. And it wasn't just military industrial, it was biopharmacological industrial complex. It was about congressional and those were things that he left out. So that's all I wanted to say. And this is beautiful. And we have campfire on Friday where we keep talking about this. And we do need to keep talking, and we need to be in solidarity. And I would certainly like to see, and as a board member of TAP, advance that, TAP can't get, we're a 501c3, but that's not to say that we can't speak to, and maybe David Schoenbrunn could talk about, what can a 501c3 organization do politically in terms of speaking to our possibilities and reclaiming our republic from a plutocracy that's stolen it. And rip this off of historical possibilities, because if Kennedy had not been killed, if his brother had not been killed, if Martin had not been killed, if Malcolm, all those guys had not been killed, history would have unfolded very, very differently. I'm absolutely convinced of that. So the plutocracy needs to pay reparations for what they've done to us. Chuck out.
Thanks, Chuck. And actually, I wanted to get a response from you, Paul, because I know that you've actually, like in your previous life prior to the Maui investigation stuff, were a big promoter of exactly this type of thing. Training activists how to step by step reclaim their city and county councils. So I don't know if you want to take a minute or two to sort of speak to that.
Well, I think it's very integral to what Chuck was just sharing, and Bruce and I, as well as a whole other group of people, started the Maui Pono Network back in 2018. And the way it was is that the county council, there are 9 members in our county council. It varies from county to county, but we have 9. And so our objective, because they're the legislators, they're the ones who pass the laws and who create the wiring of how power is distributed, how decisions are made, where resources go and don't go. So it's extremely important in terms of what the legislature does, and making sure that you have people who serve the people and environment instead of big money corporate interests. And the way we had it here in Maui for generations, as was shared earlier by John in terms of the history of what we're facing here. We're one of the most corrupt states, especially when you start to go to the state governance. But we wanted to really focus in on county governance because that's the foundation. That's where the rubber meets the road. And we're not home rule here, unfortunately. So there is still power and strings that come from the state in terms of legislation. But we got a majority in 2018. And the changes were unbelievable that started in our county at that time. In 4 years, we passed 19 charter amendments. I mean, these are huge things in terms of how power is distributed and where the main corruption happened. Every 10 years, they pick 11 people from the community to then rewire our charter. And our charter is our constitution. And so I was one of the 11 chosen from the county to rewire the system, and got involved with helping to pass in that election process 13 charter amendments. And our group, Maui Pono Network, then gets to promote. We did a lot of things to get those on the ballot. So each one of them passed. Because again, rewiring the whole system. So for example, the water was controlled by a corporation in Canada. And that's our lifeblood for the island. and determines where development goes and crops that are planted and where. So this allowed us then to have the community be control of the water system. Same with getting our, a lot of different things. There were 33 boards and commission that were appointed secretly by the mayor. And that was a huge avenue of cronyism and nepotism, which now we changed the whole thing. Now there's a group of 9 citizens who are selected by the county council and members who then select the top 3, and then that goes to the mayor and to the county council also. So it's that type of thing where you can rewire the system. And again, we were very successful starting in 2018. And then right before the fire, we started to work on a mosquito release that was happening. They have these lab-infected mosquitoes with Wolbachia. When I lived in Massachusetts, I got Lyme disease twice, so I know how these bioengineered insects, how they can affect your health and well-being. And again, we were fighting that, and we were just about to go on tour and do education on that, and then August 8th happened. So, whether we were targeted, because I noticed that a lot of the counties who were very progressive, who were really making changes, who were getting rid of the good old boy network, who were going, out of this corporate mentality to serving the people and environment, those counties have been attacked with mosquitoes and other types of things that are abnormal. So I don't know if it's because we were successful with the Maui Pono network that helped catalyze some of this, or whether it was just planned a long time ago, but here we are. And I think that as we work together to look at where you can make a change in counties, in the cities, and in townships, that's where you can change the legislation so that it supports the people and the environment, so that they're aware of these attacks, so that you can support the right people and get them elected. Because once you then have those right representations in there, then you can change the laws peacefully, and without this, big revolution. But again, it starts with awareness, getting people consciously aware of what's going on in terms of this other war that we're facing right now, and to make sure that they have the right people in the county that supports then the people and environment instead of the corporate agenda. So that's just a little something about what we've been doing. We've been organizing, and my background is I have 43 years as an organizational development consultant. So there's ways of doing that so that you can really start to organize local communities so that you can take over local governance. And again, that will be a protective barrier, especially in some of the states that have home rule. It's a great way to deal with this battle that we're doing right now.
Paul, I have a question. Do we have a grand jury trying to get involved with this? Like how
Yes.
we're doing with?
Yeah, we have a grand jury. We have 51. We're waiting to see about our county governance. We had meetings with the mayor. Bruce did this incredible job of sequestering ash and substrate and looking at that. Actually, in the top layer, top 2 inches, basically 92% of the toxins are in that upper layer. And then we did samples of the substrate, and we presented that to the mayor. And we asked them after we did that, and he was very open and receptive. We had a 2-hour meeting with him, and then talked about then our investigation. And he's really open to hear all of the experts when they come in. So we're still finishing up our report at this point in time. But when we're hoping to get the county on board with us. If we get the county on board, it's a whole new ballgame. So.
And can I ask, on the Kanaka Maoli side, on the Hawaiian Kingdom side, is there anybody or any group or leaders within that are on board with what we're doing? Because I know with the Mauna movement and even Standing Rock, we were with some of the top leaders, but is anyone on that side, teaming up?
So we are the Maui Community Investigation is kind of the community organization that's taken this on, and all of the Hawaiians that we talk to, all of the Hawaiian leaders that we talk to are very enthusiastically supporting what we're doing. Bruce, you want to add on to that a little bit?
Yeah.
Well, most of the Kanaka and the Hawaiians really are just trying to deal with the trauma and finding housing for people and just basic, helping get that going, not so much trying to like who done it, how did it happen, etc. So that's why, we're kind of leading that charge, although I'm in contact with many of the Hawaiian leadership, particularly on our Separate the Ash from the Soil campaign. We're all on board with that. But everybody sees the anomalies and sees things are wrong, but trying to put that together in a picture so we can make sense out of it is a real trick.
Right. And I totally understand the grieving process, and they have not had a chance to grieve. My family and I stood with them when they flew out to Oahu from Lahaina, and we personally delivered the petition to the governor, which he was missing in action. But to stop tourism in the Lahaina area during this process. So we were a part of that. And I completely understand the grieving process, and with their capital, and they haven't had time to even grieve. But it's very important that we hope we bridge with them and bring in the Kanaka Maoli with this fight, because they're really going to be the driving force, I believe, with this whole process.
I've contacted a bunch of the leadership in the Hawaiian community about the Separate the Ash from the Soil campaign, because right now, when they're cleaning they're taking like Paul said, 90 to 95% of the toxins are in that ash layer, and then they're scraping the soil at the end and getting the toxins out of the soil. But most of the volume, what they're removing is the soil. A small amount of the volume is the ash, and that's where the toxins are. So right now they're just mixing together in a toxic soup, which will eventually go out to the landfill and will eventually leach into the water table. So our thing is, no, let's separate it and let's use the technology to treat the ash, which interestingly enough is called plasma arc technology. Again, it's like taking the ash and throwing a high lightning bolt at it to change the state of it from solid to liquid, where you vitrify it into a liquid and make an onyx-like glass substance out of it. So you end up with something that's encased and no longer toxic, and a microcosm of all the ash that was there. And the mayor most liked the idea that we could take all these little pebbles of onyx-like glass at the end and make blocks out of it and make a memorial wall, like this is the ash layer from all the houses, and put the names of everybody who died on that. And so they were very receptive. So we're actively working right now to try to bring this technology and to get the Army Corps of Engineers and the FEMA to agree to separate the ash from the soil on the temporary site at Olawale right now, so that we have the ability to do the technologies on the two in the end.
It was perfect for March 22nd when Bruce and Trina, they do the campfire chat to bring up the process of regaining the land back, because this is a huge land grab, and who's going to get it? As this process gets stretched out, and people can't keep up with their payments or keep their land, who's going to win in the end with the land? That's the real question. So I mean, that's going to be a good discussion for the Q&A, but something to think about. We want to have a toxic free soil to rebuild for the families and businesses, but in that time frame, who's going to lose out as it's drug on? Just something to think about.
Well, the deeper question that I ask is, they've never scraped 6 inches of soil after a fire before. The first time that FEMA Army Corps of Engineer people remember was the Paradise fires in California. It's the first time they said, oh, this is so toxic, we have to scrape 6 inches of soil and bury it. And so it makes me wonder, is there something in there that we don't know about from some sort of technology that makes this soil so much more toxic than normally? You have to be able to know what you're testing for. You can't just randomly test. You have to test for an object And I wonder
Right.
what is that thing that might be causing that?
Well, that's
With
an important
9/11,
question because, as we know from the destruction of the evidence at the World Trade Center,
yeah,
followed
exactly.
along similar lines. Sims Metal Management got the contract, sent all the metal over to China. So
Right.
since we suspect that this is a similar type of false flag, look, we're spotting the exact same fingerprints.
Mhm.
This whole idea of, see, I'm glad that we brought that up. I wasn't even
Yep.
aware of this new policy. We're going to scrape the soil, right? We're doing
Right.
all kinds of things not by the book here, and these are red flags. So we're approaching the top of the hour. I would like to close at the 2-hour mark. I see Bill's hand. I'm thinking, well, we'll hear from Bill and then just kind of, put our closing thoughts out there, and I think we should start wrapping things up. So go ahead, Bill. What's on your mind? As you listen to all this. It appears you're still muted. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Okay, what's on my mind is that this has been a great discussion, and it's been a very good size of our attendance for sustaining this discussion. One thing that jumped out at me, out of many, is well, when you mentioned that you've had years of experience as an organization development consultant, and then the discussion took a turn towards local organizing, and there was reference to grand juries. One of the things we're trying to accomplish here at TAP is to create networks of networks, intersecting networks, recognizing that it's what's really important about what's going on in the country right now is that lots of initiatives are being generated. And sometimes it feels like a bad thing because everything is so decentralized and there's so many different initiatives. But I think you would all, many of you will agree that it's really a good thing. The important thing is for those initiatives to somehow intersect where they need to. And there was some of the kinds of broad networks we're talking about are the ones that Chuck talked about it, the overarching views. One of our people once coined the phrase paradigm shifting operations. The TAP is about scraping away the deception concerning paradigm shifting operations. But another level is organizing. And one of our board members who's not on the call tonight because of a family emergency, but Mike Zarzano has made a very good tie-in with a new organization called Our Country, Our Choice. Some of you may have heard of Colonel Douglas McGregor. He's involved with this one. And they're apparently really helping Mike through his original organization, County, what's it called? countycongress.org, to help build local chapters. I think their initial focus has to do with the formation of local grand juries. So Paul and Bruce, we should really get you in touch with him because they did a big publicity and he's suddenly getting a big flood of people who can and want to lead county chapters. We support that kind of an initiative. I think OCOC may bring some more resource to it, but they need, it sounds like you could use the muscle that they can help to generate to support the broad concept of local initiatives to support grand juries, but they could also use your expertise and your issue. So that's one thing. There's also a new partner that we have from Tennessee, Karen Bracken. Some of you may know about her who's looking at ways of increasing autonomy at the state level from unwanted federal intervention, the principle of nullification. She's posted as a partner of TAP on our website. You may want to look at her work and see if that's relevant to some of the broader historical issues that Cayle has mentioned regarding Hawaii and its history and its future. So those are two other network circles that you may want to intersect with. You should all be aware that we have this concept of partners of TAP. We're giving websites to those partners in hopes that their efforts will, again, serve this broad purpose that I described. Actually, Susan, we've sort of taken Boston 9/11 Truth for granted, but you guys should be a partner too. So talk to Trina and Bruce and Chuck about that. Perhaps we can do something like that because you are one of the enduring local 9/11 groups, and Hawaii is too, of course. So Cayle, that includes you. So these are some of the ways we can interact with some of you who are on this call. through the partnership status, through helping, working with Mike on county level local grand jury initiatives, and through sharing ideas about these different paradigm shifting operations, which we've been looking for connections among during many wings of this conference. And the last thing is, Paul, particularly with that organizational development experience that you have, from what I've just said, I think you can see many areas in which we could certainly benefit from your expertise if we can carve out an extra 10 minutes a month out of your busy schedule.
So
I hope that you'll pursue that with our group.
I
Yes.
would be happy to network and to do whatever I can to support you. I've written several books on organizational development. I wrote 5 books on it. And certainly the whole process that Bruce and I developed with other people so that we can get our local governance back in control of the people. So I'd be happy to have discussions with you about that.
Hey, can I jump in before we close, Bruce? I know we're coming to the top of our hour, and I don't know that we necessarily have to do a hard close to our show, because this has been such a powerful 2 hours, and this will be on our Rumble links. It'll be on our different connections. So the importance of the work that is being done in Hawaii with Paul and Bruce, and the kind of activism you're deploying is what needs to be played out across the country. And you are kind of the beta for what is truth movement, engaged not cerebrally in our minds behind our computers in our homes, but actually going out to our elected officials and speaking normally about what's true, and not speculating, oh, maybe this, maybe that, but in fact, we've been lied to. And this is actually the founding opening sentence on the TAP mission statement, is we've been lied to. And we've been lied to for a long friggin' ass time. And our movement is not left nor right. It's humanitarian, it's ecological, and it's about decency and dignity. And that has been totally stripped out from society as a consequence of the impunity of this powerful structure that never has been held to account. And I think that's a part of what we're engaged in here, is normalizing talking about stuff that we are slurred with as conspiracy theorists. And I'll just close with this. I'm in the Green Party, and it's kind of a dead end, and probably the independent political movement is where there's the big possibilities. All of these county seats are nonpartisan. The bottom line is directly engaging and speaking to our demands for, I don't know, I'm going to stop with that. What are our ultimate demands? For me, it's ecology, it's dignity, it's humanity, and it's liberation from this obvious technocracy that's globalized and is advancing what appears to be a emerging techno-totalitarianism. So that's my shtick. Good luck, you guys. I'll be here.
Great. Well, I don't know if anyone wants
Looks
to
like
stick
Cayle
around.
wants to
I know
comment.
we will eventually want to start. We want to close off our recorded portion. But I don't know if you guys have one last sentence.
One last thing.
No, for sure.
Just that if people could help spread the word. Again, there's a tremendous amount of data we've gathered and put together and organized on our website. That's Maui Community Investigation.com or .org. And again, please visit us. We have a petition there. If you could sign that, that would be very helpful, because we're going to show community support for what we're doing. And it doesn't matter if you're in Hawaii or not, just put your zip code down so that we can know what area you're signing in from. So that all would be very helpful. If you could help us with legal matters right now, we're in pursuit of 4 different avenues, like I said, of legal issues. Again, common law is one of them. And there are, I think, a lot of ways that we can really move forward with this and take this truth to a whole other level of conscious awareness to break down some of these old belief systems. Bruce, you want to, anything else to add?
I think you said it well.
Cayle has his hand up.
No. Where am I? Didn't take it down.
Oh. Bruce, you're muted, Bruce.
Okay.
Thank you guys for putting this presentation together once again. And I guess, Cayle, if you just have like some final closing thoughts, we're going to turn off the recording, and anybody wants to, stick around and share things from there. Fantastic. Go for it.
I just wanted to say, Trina, Bruce, thank you for coming to me and trying to get this together. And Bruce and Paul, thank you for coming. We appreciate it. And this is what it's all about. Our children and our future. Okay?
That's
Don't
right.
forget that. Anybody watching this, do not forget that. It is our future.
That's right.
Just thank you, everybody. Thank you. We appreciate it. Mahalo.
Here, here. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for coming. Trina, I don't know if you want to
Mahalo.
close off the recording and.
Yes, give me just a second. Let me stop the recording and then I'll
The
stop.
recording has
Let me
stopped.
stop the live
Super.
stream just a minute.